Welcome to the United Synagogue's Yom Hazikaron commemoration. Yom Hazikaron occurs on the 4th of Iyar, and Israel and the Jewish world remembers all those who have died defending Israel or in terrorist attacks. I'm honored today to welcome Rabbi Dov Kaplan and his son Yoad. Rabbi Dov and his wife Frida served as the rabbi and rebbitzin at Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue for 7 years. Shortly after they were married, they decided to serve in Colombia as a way of helping the community and were there for close to 5 years. Rabbi Dov Kaplan currently works at the Or Torah Stone Amiel Latfutzot program, helping communities around the world with educational programs and resources, and currently lives in Tekoa, Israel. Originally from America, Rabbi Kaplan served in the 1982 Lebanon War. His son, Rabbi Yoad Kaplan, lives in Jerusalem, is married with 5 children, and teaches at the Makor Chaim Yeshiva High School. He was in the founding year of the Modi'in Hesed Yeshiva, which is a unique program to allow boys to become officers. Yoad served in the Golani Brigade and was injured in the cast-led operation in Gaza in 2009. After his injury, he was offered to be released early from the army, but he declined and resumed service after 6 months of rehabilitation. He finished first in his class from Bahad 1, the officers' training school. Rabbi Kaplan and Yoad, why was it important for you to serve in the framework of a program which combines yeshiva study with national service?
By serving in this program, the Hesder program, as some people call it, which is combining military service and studying yeshiva, both of them post high school, upper school, one manages to fulfill 2 very important obligations as a Jew, 2 very important mitzvot. Every Jew is supposed to learn Torah and study Torah. It's a lifelong endeavor. And it's not only for personal benefit or advancement. We believe an educated nation, an educated people, especially when it comes to our faith and our beliefs and our practices, makes us more determined and ensures that we'll have a smoother path to our destiny, to fulfilling our destiny. So finishing high school, after having studied in a yeshiva high school for years, I still realized I needed to take it up a few levels. And so that's one important mitzvah of Talmud Torah. The second mitzvah is, of course, defending the people of Israel who are here, who are settled, and defending and establishing our foothold in our national home in Israel. Somebody has to do it. It's a very big mitzvah. It's a dangerous mitzvah. And the combining of both of them turns into a very big Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. When Israelis of all different persuasions see boys with kippot on, with their tzitzit in or out, getting up earlier before they have to go to shul and to daven and keeping Shabbat, but just as good soldiers as the rest of them, that's a very big sanctifying of God's name. They realize there's nothing wrong with being religious, loyal to our traditions, and also defending and serving the country.
It's hard to answer after Dad said everything, because now you understand why I went. You understand what house I grew up in. Whoever of you who know my mom and dad know I grew up in a house which taught us to be responsible to our society, to the people around us, on all aspects. Looking around, seeing who needs help, where can we give a hand. And as Dad said, we as Jews believe we're living in 2 aspects of life. We've got the spiritual one and the more practical, materialistic one. And on both sides, we need to take this responsibility. We can't say we're going only on one and leaving the other to other people to do, and not us. So that's why going to yeshiva, growing the world of Torah, studying, teaching, is part of the responsibility we need to take of our society, of the Jewish people, and of the world. And of course, the other side we can't leave is defending on, let's say, the materialistic life. And that's why, pushed by mom and dad, I decided to go to yeshiva in Modi'in, which Rabbi Shenvad, Rosh Yeshiva, taught us to want to be officers, to want to be leaders, not only to do what we're obligated to do, but to take it a step ahead and take more responsibility of the people around us and help them fulfill what we think should be happening.
Thank you. Rabbi Dov Kaplan, you participated in the infamous Battle of Sultan Yaqub in 1982, which you wrote about in the From Exile Towards Redemption Masor. Please, can you share that experience and explain how that influences your commemoration of Yom Hazikaron?
So again, I participated as a young man. I was 22, just 22 at the time. In 1982, it was called Operation Peace for Galilee. I can't really share the experience because it would take a few hours. It was a traumatic experience for all of us who were there. Nobody left there or the same. We grew up quite a bit that night, and it left us with a lot of thoughts and thought-provoking memories until today, when we meet up some friends, whether incidentally or for get-togethers. That, of course, is the topic that comes up. So I can't really encapsulate it, but I will. I'll try to share a little bit and explain what it made me, and what it made of me. So in 1982, we were called up. If some of you might remember, the Israeli ambassador to the Court of St. James, he was shot in the head coming out of, I believe, a dinner on one of the hotels, I believe the Dorchester on Park Lane, a hotel I got to know well from all the bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, and weddings and other dinners that took place. So to imagine, he was shot there. He survived, but not very. He was in a vegetative state for the rest of his life, and it was by a Palestinian terrorist, and that was a trigger for Israeli forces to go and clear out the terrorist den of the PLO that had taken control of southern Lebanon. So we were called up from yeshiva. We were already back in yeshiva, almost at the end of our program, and we were called up in the middle of the night to go and assemble at our pre-designated assembly points up north to man our tanks and to head for the border. We sat a few days around at the border before we went in. We were called up on Sunday, and we sat around at the border ready to go in when needed, while other Israeli forces had spearheaded the invasion. And we were finally ready to cross the border Wednesday evening under the cover of darkness. Before we went in, we had one last prayer service, a mincha service, the afternoon service. And it is etched in all of our memories and our hearts, because by that time, we were young and we were full of bravado. We were sure of ourselves. We were the Israeli tank corps. We were believers in Hashem and that Hashem would be watching over us. And we believed wholeheartedly in our cause that the northern settlements of Israel, as the rest of Israel, deserve peace. And before we went in, we formed a mincha, we davened, and then one of the boys, a boy by the name of Zev Reutman, together with Yehuda Katz, they started screaming at us or calling out to us, preaching to us, when they realized that the bravado had gone and each one of us had withdrawn into ourselves, realizing that this is not a tribe or a Bnei Akiva camp that we're heading to. This is not just an outing. We're going into battle, and bullets and shells fly and fall. And just the idea of the danger is one thing, and even we're nice Jewish boys. We're going in to kill people. And they started calling out to us, and they quoted Maimonides, the Rambam, from his code of laws of kings. And then we formed a circle to dance like a hora dance, but a very solemn one, sort of trying to get the right focus, that we're going to fight for the Jewish people in God's name. But we realized it is a dangerous mitzvah, it's a dangerous mission. That we all dispersed, we said goodbye, we hugged each other, and we went back to our tanks, and we did cross the border. The battle itself took place on that Thursday night, a day later. During Wednesday, we went in Wednesday night. Thursday morning, we had a few assignments. We fought against the Syrians and some terrorist fortifications. And Thursday night, we found ourselves caught in an ambush. We were way ahead of the Israeli lines. We knew we were spearheading the advance, but under the cover of darkness, the Israeli generals thought they could swallow quickly, gulp down a few more kilometers before the Syrians managed to rearm and retake their positions, their defense positions. And under the cover of darkness, we hadn't been told Syrian commandos had been helicoptered in to stop our advance. And we found ourselves running out of ammunition, running out of petrol, tired because we'd barely slept the night before and we had been in combat the whole day. And we found ourselves surrounded. Again, we had the nerve and the conviction that the Israeli army, the IDF, Tzahal will save us. But a few hours went by, we found ourselves actually running out of ammunition. The whole time we were praying, saying the chapters of Psalms that we remembered by heart, saying personal prayers. But as the time went by, we realized our situation was growing graver and graver. And the Israeli forces behind us, it seems, couldn't get to us, and we were on our own, other than Hashem. We sort of pooled our stories years later, or over the next few years, and we realized we were all praying. Not only that, we all thought that we were going to end our young lives that night. I'm trying to share with you my experience, and we were all saying vidui, the confession that a Jew says on Yom Kippur and on other occasions, or when he thinks he or she is in a very grave situation and wants to try to absolve themselves or at least ask for forgiveness. We truly thought we were going to end our lives then. We made our peace with Hashem, and we kept on fighting. At one point, I found my knees shaking in the tank out of fatigue and also out of fear. I realized I'm frightened. Nobody wants to die. And as I said before, it was pretty obvious to us that what was going to happen in a few moments. After a while, I found myself calm, and I tried to evaluate myself while I was constantly looking through my telescope to see if there was any enemy trying to overrun our tank, and this was happening the whole time. And I realized that I was calm because it was a given that I'm going to die. And now I'm sorry if I'm making light of this, but this is truly the experience. And I found myself, okay, that's going to happen. Now the question is, what am I going to do with the rest of the time that is remaining? And I realized the most important thing is, if you want, the biggest mitzvah at that point was to make sure I took full advantage of whether it's 5 minutes, 30 minutes, another hour or so before I end up in Shamayim and make my way to heaven. And I realized that was the most important thing. Death, I was not fearful of death anymore. I just had to make my life, whatever was left with it, meaningful. I'm skipping to the end of the story. In the end, we managed to pull back in the morning under a very heavy Israeli artillery bombardment that was meant to keep the Syrians at bay and the terrorists that were there, and to let us pull out under the cover of exploding shells and a smoke screen. Most of us got out of there. I did lose some very good friends. I mentioned two boys before, Zev Reutman and Yoad Kaplan. Both of them did not return from the battle, very sadly. I knew them well. They were truly very, very good human beings and very loyal and dedicated Jews. And it was truly a tragedy for their families and, of course, for all of us. So I'm here today, and I realized through a whole thought process that took months and maybe even years, that the same thought I had in the battle as a young man to make the most of my life as a Jew, that is my mission in life, to make the most of the time. None of us know how much longer we have. We all pray for long, prosperous, healthy, and happy lives, but we don't know. So the main thing is to appreciate every day and make the most of it, make it meaningful. Everybody has their own individual mission, shlichut, and I decided mine was to make Jews more aware and to help more and more people, Jews and non-Jews, to make the most of their lives. And that gives meaning to my life and is giving meaning to my life since then.
It's an incredible story. Incredible. Thank you.
People can read more details in the Masr, in the United Synagogue Tribe Masr.
Yeah. Yoad, you served and were injured in Operation Cast Lead in Gaza in 2009. What were your experiences and how have they shaped what you've done since?
As that said, it's really a long story, but I'll try to give a couple of notes of this things that happened those days. We'll start at the beginning. Cast Lead operation started during Hanukkah. At that time, my lovely young sister had her bat mitzvah, Nuria, and I asked for a leave from the army to go to be Shabbat with the family for the bat mitzvah. So we went together, all the family with grandma and grandpa, to a hotel in Herzliya. But since I knew, and my commanders told me that the situation was tense, they told me to be ready for anything that could happen. So in the middle of Shabbat, I heard from Al-Qaeda, from the waitress, I think, that the IDF started bombing Gaza from air, and we understood something was starting. I went up back to my room and saw my commander tried to phone me a couple of times, and it was a real strange feeling because it was the middle of Shabbat, usually not touching anything electronic and not phoning anyone. I phoned back and he said, listen, you need to come straight back to us in the south. Can't tell us anything on the phone because they might be listening, but you need to come back as fast as you can. So I'm there in the middle of Shabbat. You probably know the Herzliya scenery, the seaside, feeling in the middle of Hanukkah is feeling like on a vacation. And suddenly I need to put on my uniform, take my weapon, say goodbye to all the family, hug mom and dad, my siblings, grandma and grandpa, and start my way back. It's just this awkward and amazing feeling of being an Israeli soldier, which you really defend your country, your family, the soil we stand on. It's everything around us. So I came out of the hotel, and you can imagine in the middle of Shabbat, they see a religious soldier walking out. I heard people whispering around me, and not having any buses around, didn't know how would I get to Tel Aviv. I knew I had to get there. So I hitchhiked, and the first car stopped. Just said, "Tell me where you need, I'll take you." So getting to Tel Aviv and going down north and down south, meeting all the soldiers, and really, as Dad said, it's a tough situation. It could be scary, and there were parts that I was scared. And what I felt gave me strength, except of the belief in Hashem, was the friends around me, the people. If you feel you trust the people around you, it gives you strength. It gives you the ability to deal with the situation. We had soldiers around us who were just joined us. There were all kinds of people, experts with dogs and all, who were alone without the guys they knew, and they were afraid. And since we tried to take them with us, to pair with us, so to feel more confident, because when you're together in a group, you can manage the situation better. The days passed. We were training and waiting to go in and do the mission that we had. And on the Shabbat, it was the week after, on the Shabbat, they told us, now this Shabbat you'll be going in. It was a very powerful Shabbat with a lot of prayers and amazing togetherness. And on Shabbat afternoon, we boarded the buses. And boarding the bus, just before, there was a soldier who gave us out, each and every one of us, a letter, a sealed letter. She said it was from the kids of the settlements around Gaza, from the towns around Gaza, thanking us and wanting to bless us before we go and defend them. Because it was Shabbat, I didn't open my sealed envelope. I put it in my pocket, and we went off. After getting to where we had to, and getting arranged, and davening and doing Havdalah, and having the chief rabbi, the chief IDF rabbi, Rabbi Ronsky, Zichro Livracha, saying to us the prayer that the Kohen Mashuach Milchama used to say to the Israelites going out to war. And we just got into this long column of soldiers, of guys in the deep darkness, explosions going off far ahead of us in the Gaza Strip. We just started walking, and after this amazing experience of dancing and having enthusiastic talks, suddenly you're alone in the darkness. You try to keep a bit far from the guy before you and behind you. So, and if anything, God forbid, happens, it doesn't happen to everyone together. So you're actually alone with a lot of thoughts and this amazing feeling that, as I said, I'm going to defend my country. I'm going to defend the towns. I'm going to defend the children around us from all those shells and bombs coming out. And after a couple of hours of marching, going through the fence, we had mortar shells starting falling around us until this one mortar shell fell too close to us, shrapnel hitting me and guys around me. And suddenly this silence turns out to be this havoc, like of calling out, guys asking for a medic to come, everyone checking where everyone is, this big mess. And you understand it's the real thing. It's not a game. And as Dad said, you can go in full of confidence, but you understand things could happen. I remember praying the paragraph saying, "Gam ki elech begeit al mavet, lo ira ra ki ata imadi." Maybe Dad, you translate that.
Ye, as I walk through the valley of death, I fear not evil, for you were with me.
And I understood. I always used to say that pasuk confidently, like saying, when I would walk there, I won't be afraid. And suddenly I understood I'm saying it now as a prayer. When I'm here, help me not to be afraid. Help me understand what I need to do. I had shrapnel in my hand, in my arm, in my right forearm. And there were about another 10 guys around me with different injuries. We were taken out we walked halfway and we were took out by ambulances on the fence. And then again, this change after being in that darkness and that mess and muddy and cold, arriving at Soroka Hospital in Be'er Sheva, where everyone's taking care of you, everyone's wanting to hear how you feel. I called Mom and she hopped into the car as fast as she could. And this last experience I had was there at the hospital. Those days, I was a week in the hospital having surgery and taking medicine. And that week there's like flooding of people, of Israelis, of Jews, of coming from all over the country and all over the world just to say thank you. Everyone wanted to feel part of this, this going into defense to defend our land, and soldiers were in, but all the civilians wanted to be part of it too. I was like covered with the amount of presents and sweets and cards and from children and elderly and students and new immigrants and from the Golan Heights, from everyone. This was this amazing hug to feel what an amazing nation we have, what an amazing country we have that comes together. And at those days, there was an Israeli singer called Ariel Horovitz who wrote a song who said that the song says that at the day-to-day basis, there's so many things to hide the beautiful face of the nation. People fight and there's politics and there's TV shows and when the nation needs someone to lie in that ditch of mud and defend her, you can't believe how this beautiful face of the country comes out like flowers coming, popping out of rocks. And I'm walking around with that song since in my pocket, and reminding myself what an amazing country we have and what an amazing nation we have, and trying to be part and to be to deserve to be part of this amazing nation. That's my experience since.
It's great to hear those stories, especially how appreciated you were. So it's really good to hear that. Rabbi Kaplan, how did you feel when Yoad, your eldest son, went off to battle?
Well, went off to battle or went into the army. The day that he went into the army, we were filled with pride. We actually, most soldiers, when their first day in the army, they go into the induction center, whichever part of the country they're coming from, and parents, grandparents are allowed to come along. It's a Jewish country, it's a Jewish army. In the case of Yoad, because he was going in with a group of friends from his yeshiva, they were all going in together. Their rabbi, who we had gotten to know already, also accompanies them. And they're at the induction center amongst hundreds of other young Israelis. They form a circle and they dance a little bit, sing some songs of dedication and songs that we know from shuls and from other Jewish festivals. And then each one turns to their parents asking for a blessing, the bracha that many parents use to bless their children Friday nights at the Shabbat table. It's a very moving experience and everybody is very teary-eyed. And everybody is trying to, especially the parents, trying to block out their own experiences, especially if they've seen combat. You're just full of joy, full of nachat, of pride, but also, honestly, of dread. And now if we skip forward to that, when he walked off sort of into the sunset on that Shabbat Chanukah, heading for wherever he was going, we were our hearts were bursting with, I was crying, literally crying. And then when we knew he was going in, because he told us the code word between us was, I won't be able to speak to you because we're turning off our phones. Yoad mentioned before that we realized that the enemy might be listening in, eavesdropping even on mobile phones. So therefore their phones are taken away before they go into operation. So that was the code name for, basically he was going in. We said some prayers, Frida and myself. We tried to watch the news reels, but we realized they were just repetitive. They weren't divulging any information. And it's something that many Israeli parents have to go through. And it's part of the Israeli experience, and it's not a pleasant part of the experience, but it gives us a lot of pride that this is our youth who are willing to, as we did, willing to risk their lives for the continuation of the Jewish people here in our homeland, in Eretz Israel.
And Yoad, how did you feel going off to war, considering your dad's experiences and how he fought in an infamous battle?
I think my first and most strong thing I remember about Dad and that battle is at my bar mitzvah. Dad was standing in the shul in Caesarea as a rabbi and blessing me and up at the front of the shul. and suddenly in the middle, he was full of tears and he couldn't continue, and he just came off to sit by me, and he couldn't finish his speech because his throat was full of tears, remembering his friends who weren't as fortunate as he was. I think going into battle, I wasn't thinking about it. As Dad mentioned before, Maimonides says that when going into battle, you need to try not to think about your family, because that could bring you into fear. You need to think about the nation, being part of this amazing nation. I think maybe the second strong experience around Dad's friends was a couple of years later. I was in Jerusalem in the OU building, in the library there, and suddenly I noticed the library was named after Shmuel Yair Landau, which was Dad's friend, which my sister is named after. And seeing his picture of a young guy about the age I was then, and thinking he will never be older than me. I'm now his age, even though he was born when my dad was born, because he won't have a family. I was struck. I couldn't, and that's part of it. Tragically, now I have friends who, when I grow older, coming to their grave every year on the Remembrance Day, which this year I can't. I see the age stays the same. They don't grow older. And only I have now 5 kids. One of my children, the third one, is named after my friend Benaya, who was killed in action in a defensive edge operation. It's hard. It's hard to feel it. It's hard to be part of this experience, understanding lives do finish, and I need to appreciate as much as I can. And as Dad said, do good as much as I can with the life I was given and with the present of life I was given since.
Thank you. Rabbi Kaplan, you served alongside your friend and fellow immigrant Zacharia Baumel, who went missing in action in 1982. Only last year were his remains finally brought to Jewish burial in Israel. Could you share some reflections about Zacharia and your feelings last year?
Well, first of all, what Yoad said about the age resonates with me completely. When I finally had the opportunity to go to visit his grave a few days after, or actually a few months, because we were still in London at the time. I remember exactly where I was when I heard the news. I was in the modern Tate in London, and I sat I think Yoad, you sent me the message on WhatsApp, and I sat down on a bench and I started crying. And a few people came up to me, strangers, said, "Sir, are you all right?" And how do I explain in the middle of London what had just happened? Actually, we were visiting, we were teaching, we're already back in Israel. But anyway, when I finally got to go to the grave, and I went, if any of you are familiar with the movie Saving Private Ryan, as the movie begins and ends, spoiler alert, with the veteran going with his children and grandchildren, going to visit the grave. That's a little bit that like I felt when I went to visit Zacharia Baumel's grave in Har Herzl in Jerusalem. And what I was saying before, I was very confused, first of all, emotionally. On one end, we were happy that he, so to speak, was returned, but he never did return, and he never did raise a family. And I noticed on his tombstone, it mentions his age. And I think, that's impossible. He's not 22. He's 59 like I am. And it's a very strange feeling to feel that his life was uprooted and plucked out like that. Zacharia himself was a nice boy. Nobody's perfect. He had a very good sense of humor. And we had a few experiences and a few laughs together when we went through yeshiva, and went through the army together. The Yom Hazikaron, the Memorial Day for Israeli soldiers last year, it was obvious that myself, my family, or whoever was with us, we were going to try to stand during the siren when the entire country of Israel comes to a halt in memory of their sacrifice and what was lost, and remember in standing with the families who are still grieving for the great loss. And there's too many families like that in Israel. We couldn't get near the grave. First of all, he was buried in a relatively new section where there are sadly newer graves, and that means many more family members are still alive and many more friends are still around to come and visit. When we realized we couldn't get near physically, literally, we couldn't get near his grave, we decided, let's go to a graveside or a grave where there isn't anybody, because the family has all died out, or the friends are too old, and so on. And we found ourselves in the section for soldiers who had fallen in 1948 during the war for the independence of Israel. And there's one unique grave, a very sad case, that it just has a number grave, and it says Ploni Almoni, an anonymous soldier. Now, Israel doesn't have anonymous soldiers. This is what makes us so special. Everyone counts, and we love, and everybody's a brother or a sister or a son or a father. How is it possible that there's a soldier buried here that doesn't have his name on the gravesite, and there's nobody there except for a designated soldier? The Ministry of Defense sends soldiers to stand next to graves during the ceremony where there isn't anybody standing. And we stood next to, Frieda and myself stood next to this soldier, and she was crying, and we were crying. The story is of that soldier, he was a survivor from the camps who had just gotten off the boat, and these are known stories, and he was handed a rifle, given very, very superficial and basic initial training, and was sent on an operation to probably the one to try to open up the road, the access to Jerusalem that was under siege, the city of Jerusalem. And most of his unit were wiped out, were killed in the battle. They had little experience, and it was maybe a badly planned operation, but nobody had written down his name. The only thing that was remembered was the number on his arm. And he exchanged, so to speak, that number for a number in the Israeli army. And I'm sure in the heavens, he cherishes the second number, not the first number. But we stood there crying for those soldiers who died so young, and in that case, his name wasn't even there. So it was a very moving experience for us. Zechariah Baumler being returned, the story goes is that the prime minister was asked by Vladimir Putin, what does Israel want as reward in exchange for, Israel had passed on information, intelligence information, that thwarted a terrorist attack on Russian military personnel in Syria, and it saved Russian lives. And the Israeli government and the cabinet knew that Putin would offer something in exchange as a reward. And they had thought of many different things they could ask for. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, says, we thought of, we'll ask them to stop supplying missiles to Iran, to stop supporting the regime of Syria, and who knows what else. But he said when finally it came to it, that he met with Vladimir Putin and was asked, okay, what do you want? We owe you. He said spontaneously, the first thing that came out of his mouth was, we want the bodies of our soldiers returned. Zechariah Baumler, together with Yoad Kaplan and two others, they went missing in action. They were seen out of their tanks alive, but they never came back. They were never taken captive, and we never recovered their bodies. So for more than 38 years, we've been looking for their bodies. Israel never gave up the hope to find, at least, if they're not alive, which was the hope at the beginning, to at least cover the bodies. And that's the first thing that popped out of the prime minister's mouth. We want them back. And Putin asked, what are you talking about? What bodies of which soldiers? And Netanyahu explained soldiers that went missing over 35 years ago. We want them back. Putin was shocked, astounded. He said, who cares? What country cares about soldiers that went missing decades ago? Think of all the missing in action in Afghanistan and other theaters and other campaigns. And Netanyahu said to Putin, "My people care." Supposedly, Putin was so moved, he said to Netanyahu, "I will help you recover those bodies from a cemetery where we suspected they've been buried near Damascus." But he said, that's for free. I'm so moved by your people that they care so much, I will give you something else for your asking. So there's a whole story that the Russians helped us get him back, and we have to be thankful for them. There are still others missing in action. We hope that it will give some kind of closure to the families. But for me, it was definitely something, I don't know if closure, but definitely reinforcing in me the need that, well, if Zachariah, I wasn't a better soldier or a better Jew than he was. I have no idea why I survived and he didn't. But then I have to be more committed to making the Jewish people more firm that this is where we belong, and that we have to remain loyal to our people and to our ancestors, the heroes, our great-grandparents, wherever they grew up and wherever they were in the world. They were committed to the Jewish way and to remaining Jews, and they wanted their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren forever to remain loyal to the Jewish people.
So this is a question to both of you, Rabbi Kaplan and Yoad. What messages do you have from Israel for British Jewry this Yom Hazikaron, especially in the times that we're in at the moment? What can you share with us and help us to commemorate this year?
Yoad, I'm going to let you start this time.
Yom Hazikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut are amazing days, days of feeling together, days of remembering those who gave so much so we could live here, and giving us responsibility to continue. National days, you really literally feel everyone around you is a brother, is part of your this big family. And these days, I remember, as I said, Naya, my friend, Achikam Amichai was also a classmate of mine, who was killed while going to a trip by Hebron, where he lived, and Alexander Mashvitsky, who was killed in Cascade operation with my unit. This year is a very strange year because we can't really get together. So part of it is trying to be virtually together, like we're doing now. There's an initiative of having small couples of two people standing with a flag at the junction, just so everyone can see that we didn't forget those who gave their lives and their families. Amazing days around here make me feel grateful to be part of the nation of Israel and in the land of Israel. I know I got it as a gift. My grandparents did this amazing step of doing Aliyah, and it was hard, and I know the sacrifice they made, and I'm grateful to them. I remember finishing the officers' courts, standing before all the cadets while given the right of the speech, and I said, my ranks, the ranks I'm gonna get tomorrow, I give them to my grandparents. I feel they deserve them. I salute them for their sacrifice and the gift they gave me to grow up in this land and being part of this amazing people. And this Yom Hazikaron, this Memorial Day, I hope we all feel this togetherness, feel the lines combining us together, even though we're so far away, and especially in the days where we have to stay at home, just feel together and feel part of this and feel this big responsibility we have as a Jewish people.
I'm glad that I let him start. It is truly a strange year. We can't go to the cemeteries, and more important, the families of the bereaved, of the soldiers who have fallen. They can't go and and be there next to the gravesite. And it's been a big polemics in Israel whether they should be allowed to go because of the pandemic, whether they should be allowed to go or not. I'm pleased that I don't have to make that decision, but we are still looking for ways to support them using social media and chat rooms that are being formed for families to tell the story of their loved son, daughter, father, brother who was lost. But I'm sure many people are feeling alone during the pandemic, especially people who are older, who have been told to self-isolate. And first of all, I know they must feel even lonelier than usual, but no Jew should ever feel alone. And I'm not only talking about you can have conversations with Hashem, and thank God we have phones and computers and so on, but the Jewish people stand together. And hopefully, and I know through the chat rooms and the endeavors and efforts of United Synagogue, the professional teams of Tribe and of the rabbis, they're doing their utmost to make sure that nobody feels alone. Also, but I'm going to make a plug. During our time in London, serving at Hampstead Garden Suburb, we always tried to make sure, and we didn't always succeed, but we spoke about it a lot. There are people before the pandemic that felt alone. If you know someone in your community, even if they're not related to you, even if you're not sure whether they're going to welcome your approach, don't let them feel alone. When the pandemic, and God willing, it should be over soon and people will be able to go out, we should all pull together. And you've heard that from the stories, my story and Yoad's story from our service. We can achieve so much together. But I'm also talking to the community in the United Kingdom. Stand with Israel. Come and visit. Don't be lazy. Realize what Israeli parents, grandparents, and our children and grandchildren, what they have to go through in order so that you can have a homeland, that we all can have the beautiful state, the miraculous state of Israel growing stronger and flourishing. We should all remain well and safe. And I'd like to thank United Synagogue and Tribe and Tamara for putting this all together.
Thank you both so much. Your stories are incredibly moving, so insightful and so powerful. And we're really grateful that I could have a chat with you both today and we can share these stories with everybody. Especially this year, I think it's hard for us to find ways to commemorate Yom Hazikaron, but I think the messages that you've both said about us connecting together and sharing and visiting Israel will resonate so strongly with everybody. So thank you. We're very, very fortunate to be able to have this time with you. You've both dedicated so much to Israel and the Jewish people, and we just wanted to thank you for everything that you've done and will continue to do on behalf of everyone at United Synagogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara.